Welcome back to Congress Unpacked, where I pull back the curtain on Capitol Hill, exposing the truth behind every hearing and every question that shapes America's future. Today's Judiciary Committee hearing got heated as Senator John Kennedy grilled Justice Department official Brett Shumate about universal injunctions. So what's the big deal? Let's start simple. Kennedy asked Shumate, "What's a universal injunction?" Shumate said it's when a judge blocks a government policy for everyone, not just the people in the lawsuit. Kennedy wasn't buying it. He pressed, "Where's the legal basis?" Shumate admitted, "There isn't one. No law, no Supreme Court case."
Mr. Shumate, what's a universal injunction?
Senator, a universal injunction is what we call an order from a court enjoining the government in a way that goes beyond the parties to the case, but applies nationwide or in some cases universally to enjoin the government.
Is it sometimes referred to as a nationwide injunction?
Yes, it is, Senator.
Okay. What's the statutory basis for a federal judge issuing an order that affects people other than the parties before the court?
I'm not aware of a statutory basis, Senator.
There is no statutory basis, is there?
No, Senator.
What's the United States Supreme Court opinion which interprets the Constitution in a way that allows a federal district court judge to do this? Can you name me that case?
I'm not aware of one, Senator.
There isn't one, is there?
I'm not aware of one, Senator.
Kennedy's frustration boiled over. He said judges are making it up as they go. Here's the logic gap Kennedy hammered. Courts are supposed to rule for the people in front of them, plaintiffs and defendants. So how can one judge block a law for the whole country? Shumate admitted, it shouldn't be possible. Kennedy shot back, if you want to affect everyone, file a class action. That's the rule.
Now, explain to me how this works. You have a plaintiff and you have a defendant. And the plaintiff files a lawsuit and goes in front of a federal judge. Federal judge has certain jurisdiction in personam and subject matter over the parties, the people, the plaintiff and the defendant. They're the only two people in court. How can a judge, a federal judge, issue an order that affects everybody else other than those in front of him or her? How is that possible?
It shouldn't be possible, Senator, but district courts do it all the time. I think on the theory that the courts need to enjoin a federal policy from going into effect, and they often will enjoin it as nationwide, so all non-parties are protected by that injunction.
I thought that if you wanted to affect parties who aren't in court, you had to file a class action.
That's correct, Senator.
So why don't the federal judges, instead of issuing a universal injunction with no legal basis, tell the plaintiff, look, you got to go file a class action if you want to impact parties who aren't subject to my court?
Senator, the Department of Justice makes that argument all the time in our briefs. I think in many cases class actions would be inappropriate. They wouldn't. The plaintiffs couldn't satisfy Rule 23 to establish a class.
So they couldn't?
Correct.
So they preferred to ask for a universal injunction?
Yes.
Okay.
Kennedy widened the lens. He argued these universal injunctions let people shop around for the most sympathetic judge. Shumate agreed. Both sides play this game. Kennedy's message? Universal injunctions are less about justice, more about politics. Then Kennedy went old school. Did universal injunctions exist under English common law? That's America's legal roots. Shumate couldn't name a single example. Kennedy said flat out they didn't exist. In his words, universal injunctions are unknown in common law.
Does this encourage forum shopping?
Yes, Senator. Not only does it encourage forum shopping, but also district shopping and filing multiple strategic lawsuits to find one judge that will enjoin a single policy nationwide. Where if you have 5 lawsuits, a plaintiff, only one of those 5 cases needs to be successful.
And both sides, all sides, have used this as a way to forum shop, haven't they?
I think plaintiffs regardless of administrations, will often file cases in the most favorable forum, yes.
Okay, we've established that there's no basis in statute and no basis in Supreme Court precedent for a universal injunction. How about at common law? I mean, universal injunction is basically an equitable remedy. Did this exist in common law courts in England on which our law is based?
I don't believe so, Senator. I think the government has cited cases from the Supreme Court that says, courts are really bound by the scope of relief that a court in equity would have granted back in England before the founding, and the courts at that time would grant relief to the parties in the case, not far beyond the.
A universal injunction as a remedy is unknown in English common law, is it not?
I haven't done the research that far back, but I'm not aware of it.
I have. Okay. It's unknown. Wasn't part of equity.
Here's the kicker. Only 27 universal injunctions happened in the 20th century. Against Trump, at least 86 in just his first term. Kennedy called it out. This tool is being weaponized. He wrapped up by pointing to Article 3 of the Constitution. Courts decide actual disputes, not national policy. Kennedy's fix? Make it law that judges can't bind the whole country unless it's a class action. In his words, that's why God created class actions.
Only about 27 universal injunctions were issued in the 20th century. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, Senator.
But 86 of them were issued against President Trump in his first term. Is that correct?
I don't know the specific number, but they were a high number.
And so far in President Trump's second term, 30 universal injunctions have been issued against him, have they not?
Senator, I don't have a specific number, but that sounds about right.
The universal injunction has become a weapon against the Trump administration, has it not?
Yes.
And tell me again in my last 10 seconds, tell me the basis for universal injunction in Article 3. I read Article 3, which defines judicial power. Where does it mention universal injunction?
It does not, Senator. It says courts are to decide the case or controversy before them, which is based on the parties to the case.
So the Congress could act and say, look, federal judges, you render a decision to a plaintiff or a defendant, but you can't impact people outside of your courtroom other than through a class action. That's why God created class actions, isn't it?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you found this breakdown helpful, hit subscribe, like, and share. This is Congress Unpacked, pulling back the curtain on power.